Okay, just wanted to take a moment and walk you guys through at a high level what the Jive to SharePoint migration process looks like. So I went ahead and I've actually set my background just to show the high level diagram, just to kind of explain what these little pieces are. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time because I know you guys want to see the migration itself. So for the first part, equipment, basically the migration process itself, typically we would recommend that you have a couple servers or a couple VMs. It's not mandatory that you have a couple servers. One server or VM will work just fine. Definitely recommend at least a couple processors because we do parallel processing to improve the overall performance of the tool. But that's just a recommendation. Also, basically having a Jive account that has access to everything, at least read access to everything, all the different places that we're going to be migrating, and a few other things like a decent network connection because we're going to be hitting Jive pretty hard, as well as pushing stuff into SharePoint. So we need to be able to have some decent throughput for that. And then the other thing is a fairly large hard disk or hard drive space so that we can store all the physical binaries that we're pulling out of Jive. And I'll explain that here in just a minute. So the first major thing we do, kind of moving into the process, is we capture the inventory of content from Jive. The idea is that we want to pull the content from Jive into our local SQL Server database and partially into the file system. So any of the binaries, images, things like Word documents, things like that all get pulled into the file system. But everything metadata wise, everything that connects the pieces together kind of gets pulled into a SQL database. And that inventorying process basically does three primary operations. So we kind of do these in sequence. We do a command, what's called get people, which means we pull all of the individual profiles and people references from Jive into our database. And I'll show that here in just a minute. Get places that actually pulls all of the individual spaces, groups, projects, and blogs. Places is just kind of a generic term to kind of reference all four of those. But we pull all of the hierarchy into our database as well, so we know a complete list of all the different places that are in Jive. And then the next thing we do is we do what's called a shallow pull of get content. So for all the places that we've pulled into the database, we want to pull that content. Shallow basically means we're not pulling all the binaries, and we're not going to going any deeper than what Jive, the API Jive has, allows us to see. We're just going to pull the basic content so we can get some counts, so we can kind of have a high-level idea of really what's out there. Kind of moving on from there, we go in and we look at the output. We produce a spreadsheet typically as a result of this inventory phase, and we transition into the prepare phase where we actually go in and produce a spreadsheet. We go through and define, okay, what is the SharePoint structure? What should it look like based on what we see in the spreadsheet? Do we need to provision any site collections? Are there any managed paths we need to kind of be aware of? Kind of do the basic design of what the SharePoint environment is going to look like, and really leveraging the inventory that we pulled in the previous step. From there, if we've got substantial amount of places to migrate, we typically break things down into some logical groups. And if we have a large amounts, typically we do in groups of 1,000 and work with that at a time. And then that's kind of the breakdown of what we work with from a client perspective. Internally, a lot of times we'll work with batches of 50 at a time, so we can kind of better manage, what we're actually pulling out of Jive, what we're actually transforming, what we're actually pushing into SharePoint, and be able to validate at a little smaller chunk. Overall, though, we try to do things, at a large level, do that like 1,000 at a time. And then we kind of move into more the migration phase where, okay, we've got everything planned, we've pulled our initial content. Now we need to go through, and there's essentially 4 different commands we do for each of the batches, and that batches of 50 kind of is what applies here. We validate, and if a SharePoint site is not created, we validate to see if it exists. If it doesn't exist, we have the ability to create that on the fly. If needed, we need to create the SharePoint permissions. Probably won't get too deep into that in this particular demo, but we can definitely talk about that if that is something that's important to you. Get content is also run here. You saw it was run in inventory, but it's also run here again, where we actually do a deep pull. So not a shallow pull, we're doing a deep pull this time to pull the actual content and binaries and everything into the database and file system. And then kind of some new commands we've got here. Transform content. basically what that does, it takes the content that we've pulled out of Jive and it makes it ready for SharePoint. So think of all like the URLs, things that pointed to between documents, between places. Things may point to Jive. Things may point to a user profile in Jive. Well, we take and scrub and change all that so that it actually references SharePoint and the SharePoint equivalent. So that's what goes on in the transform piece. It makes sure everything is kind of SharePoint ready. And then the upload content is the final command that says, okay, everything that you've transformed and you've prepared for, let's go ahead and upload that to the target SharePoint environment. And that's kind of really what completes the migration. And then really once we've done that, we've done our batch of 50, let's say, we've gone through this process, then we go through a validation phase and we check a certain number. We validate counts to make sure things look, we're the same count that was in Jive. Do we have that in SharePoint? We do some basic inspection to make sure links and things are working properly. And then we have some high-level checkpoints to go through before we transition to the customer to do a deeper inspection. So that's kind of the high-level process. Really what we're going to dive into is really the migrate stage. I'll show you a little bit of the prepare and the batch portion of it, but we'll dive into the migrate so you can kind of see the commands, how they execute. I don't want to bore you with the inventory process because it takes a while to run some of these and not really conducive to a good demo. So, but that's basically the high-level process. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so just real quick, another follow-up to the inventory process, just so you guys can see the database that we were talking about earlier. Typically, we create a Jive to SharePoint database. The first time the tool or utility is run, it will actually create this database for us. So as long as it's got a valid connection string, it knows how to create the database and the structure. So I think I mentioned to you earlier that we do a get people, a get places, and a get content. So just to kind of translate that for you guys, if you come into the database and you'll see a multiple set of tables here. If you go into the Jive persons, that equates to the get people. So if I do a quick select on that, I can see that I've got, in this case I'm running against the Jive sandbox, which is just a kind of a generic container, a generic Jive environment. In this case I've got 561 people that I was able to find in the Jive sandbox. So that's the result of get people. It produces this structure. Same thing for get places. If you go to the Jive places, I'll go ahead and pull the 1,000 rows there, and you'll see a list of all the different places. And if you kind of look here, you'll see blogs, projects, you'll see groups, you see spaces. So those are the 4 different container types that really make up a place. Here's all the collection of places we found. Actually found over 1,000 because that is what we've limited it to. Let's see what we actually have here. 1,939 places. So that's what we found in the Jive environment. And then the next level would be go to Jive content, and if I select from that, you'll see that there's content here as well. One of the things you'll notice, you'll see content and then transform content. When we actually do the real transform, I think I mentioned to you earlier, that is the process that takes the Jive content, scrubs it, makes it ready for SharePoint. So you can see there's some of these have already been done. We actually do store this transform content into this particular table as well. So that's kind of that transition from inventory into the actual migration itself. So I'm going to stop here and we'll pick back up with the physical migration. Okay, so as we go back to our diagram, we're getting ready to prepare and then create the batches for our particular migration. In this case, we think we're just going to migrate a couple of places, just keep it simple. So what I'll do is, I showed you the database. What we do is we actually have a query we run and we produce a resulting spreadsheet from that database. And this is kind of where we would hand off to the customer, or actually work with the customer to kind of go through their inventory of all the different places. This is very similar to what I just showed you in the database with the Jive places table. It's got all the place IDs, got all the place names, everything is in here, all the types, basically a full list of places as well as content counts, how much content is associated to each of the different places based on the types. A whole lot showing up here just because it is the Jive sandbox environment. So if I go off to the right, in fact, let me do this real quick. I've actually got a couple places in here that I've set up to be the ones we want to migrate. In this case, I said, let's go ahead and make these our pilot sites. So a lot of times when we do a migration, we'll do maybe 10 pilot sites. In this case, we'll just do a couple. I'm doing the Lisa Test Group 3 and then the Lisa Test Group 3 blog that lives underneath that particular place. And this is the resulting, or this is the kind of the source Jive environment that we're going to be looking at. If I come over here, the reason I wanted to show you this is that this is the spreadsheet that we work with the customer to determine where things are going to go into SharePoint. So what I'm doing is I'm saying I'm going to use the sites managed path. It's the standard managed path in SharePoint. We can use custom ones if you'd like. A destination site, in this case it's my dev C. Edwards or Chris Edwards site. And then I've got a structure that I want to use underneath this current, and then another site underneath that, the Lisa Test Group and the Lisa Test Group blog. So we'll see how the tool will actually use this information and create these as needed, and then actually migrate the content to these particular locations. But these are the fields we would actually use, and also in the database itself to direct the content, how it goes from Jive to SharePoint. All right, so here is our source Jive place that we're going to be starting with, the AA Lisa Test Group 3. Just has a bunch of just test content things, like special characters, just some basic content we've used to kind of try different edge cases and really test the product itself. So, but just wanted to show you that this, how the migration process works. So it's suitable for that. So there's 44 pieces of content in here. That's a mixture of Jive documents, like Word documents, discussions. There's even a couple of videos in here. I believe there's blog posts. So one of the distinctions here is that blog posts look like they live in the same place in Jive, but they actually, in reality, live in a subsite. So what we're going to do is migrate this place into SharePoint, but then we'll also migrate the corresponding blog and blog post into SharePoint as a separate subsite called a blog. So we'll look at that here in just a minute, but just wanted you to kind of see the structure, how things are in here, and how things are going to look when we go into the SharePoint environment. Let's just pick one so we can have something to reference. So Lisa's awesome discussion. Some basic details, see some headers, some images, some text, and we'll look at the same sort of thing in SharePoint once we've done the migration. Okay, so now we've got the commands up here, our little cheat sheet of commands for doing a migration for two particular places. So we're going to walk through these and I'll show you how to execute them on the command line itself. I'm going to go ahead and kick this first one off and then I'll explain what it does. Right? So the first one we're doing is called validate sites. And you can see here they all start with the same sort of idea. It's the J2SP, Jive to SharePoint. -A says action and validate sites. Validate sites, what it does, it says based on these two different places, these place IDs, -I is the place IDs, go ahead and verify, do these places, based upon our mapping that we talked about earlier, are these places already set up in SharePoint? If they're not, and we have the -C option, it will go ahead and create the places for us. So let's take a look at our log file and see what it did. All right, so we always want to look for true in the log file for this particular command. We can see here it's got the dev C. Edwards. It found that, return true. And then it either found or created the dev C. Edwards current AA Lisa Test Group 3. And the same thing for the blog. And return true in both cases. So we found our items, found our places, which is great. So that means we want to move on to the next command, which is the get content. And we talked about get content earlier with inventory. Let me kick this off and I'll explain what it's doing. So get content, in this case, we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a -B for binary, so we're pulling the binaries. We're going deep, which basically means if we need to pull categories or other things that are related to content, it requires additional API calls. We do those as well. The -F says do a full pull, so don't just, anything that's changed since, it basically doesn't matter if it's changed or not, just pull everything again. -P says run in parallel, so if there's multiple processors on the machine, we can actually take advantage of that. And then the -I for the place IDs is consistent through all these commands, since these are the places we want to pull. And then the last part of it, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, is basically just a pipe to a log file, so we can actually see what the output was of this command. Actually, if we look at this, we can see that it pulled a bunch of content here. And I don't want to bore you with all that, but it took 29 seconds basically to pull the content for those two places. So not too bad. So let's go ahead and run our transform content. So transform content doesn't take all the command line options the other ones did above it. Just basically takes a list of place IDs. Like I mentioned earlier, what transform content does is it takes the content that we've pulled from Jive, whether it's in the database or in the file system, and makes things ready for SharePoint. So it fixes profile URLs, fixes any link to images, fixes links to content, make sure that everything is kind of related to SharePoint. And that's all addressed here. We'll let this one run in the background. Actually, while this is running, we haven't actually uploaded content yet, so this may take a moment to run. Because we're still kind of haven't pushed anything to SharePoint yet, let's take a quick look at our SharePoint sites. So if we come here, subsites, so there's our AA Lisa group, test group 3. You can see here that there's really nothing in here yet. If you look at the content, 0 documents, really no content's been uploaded. I can tell by looking at the menu, but for you can tell there's nothing in here. It did create the subsite for the blog, the AA Lisa Test Group 3. So I go into that. You'll see the blog site has been created just with the generic empty blog. If I look at the post, there should be nothing in here yet except for the the initial kind of blog that gets created when the site's provisioned. So that's all what we wanted it to look like. Let's go ahead and go back to our test group 3, and we'll leave it set here until we come back to it. Let's see how our transform is done. Looks like the transform finished. So let's go on to our next command, which is the, oops, we don't want that. Let's go on to our next command, which is the upload content. And here's where we physically begin pushing stuff into SharePoint. I don't know if I pasted that properly. There we go. Alright, so here's where we're actually physically uploading the content into SharePoint. And just to prove that, so if I come back in here and I go to Select Contents, you'll actually see some stuff changing. You can actually see a wiki page, a wiki library has been created now, a discussion's been created, and things are getting uploaded as we talk. If you look, in fact, if we go back to home, the menu structure should be a little different. This will actually get changed at the end. It'll update this, but I can tell based on the fact that it shows videos, discussions, wikis, that it's actually in progress of uploading content. So that's a great sign. And we can actually look at the upload. We can see that it's doing some work. This might take a little bit of time. Okay, so we see now that the upload content is finished. Let's go ahead and take a look at the resulting content in our migrated site. So if I come over here and I click on Documents, first thing you'll notice is our default or our kind of standard way of transforming and uploading this content is to use a wiki library. Really because we can maintain kind of the relationships that Jive has between containing content, and then socialization settings like likes, things like that. We want to make sure all that stuff is maintained properly, and wiki libraries have been the best way to do that in a sense. There's other ways of doing it, and we are not necessarily set on this. It's just the default mechanism that Tool uses is a wiki library for the collaborative documents, files, photos, things like that. So let's go ahead and jump into a document. You can see here it got some basic information about the document. In this case, it has an attachment, so we maintain attachments. Describes what the document is. Just again, there's not a whole lot of real HTML rich content here, so if you actually had rich content, you'd see it represented here in that sense. Let's see if we can find some stuff that has a little bit more stuff in it. Let's go to another document. Here you can actually see one with international characters. So if you kind of click on that, you'll see we actually maintain international characters across this. And let's kind of pick on maybe a actual Word, like a Word document. So here you'll see a Word document. If I click on this, it'll actually take me to the physical Word document. I can download it, open it, work with it, just like I did before. That's kind of the essence of the documents, files, binary files, photos, things like that inside of from Jive. So if I click on this, you'll see an actual photo that was uploaded. Discussions are a little different. They go to a separate library. It's actually a discussion library in SharePoint. So we use native discussions. And if I pick one of these, you can see it has an image inside of it. So here's a picture of a ring, obviously, and some commentary around what that was, some of the actual discussion, the threaded discussions, all represented here in native SharePoint form. You can see the 4 replies. If I go, let's pick a different one. All right, here's also some discussion that has some of the representation of some of the international characters. So again, a lot of this was test content, so really used just to kind of make sure all that was working properly. So let's go into the blog site. So we'll actually transition into the blog site, which is a separate template. If you scroll down, you'll see the order that they actually created in. You'll see attachments. If I click on one of these, you'll actually be able to interact with the attachment. You can see it got downloaded. See the images, more attachments, so on and so forth. So all the blog content is maintained in the sequence, and we actually do leverage the SharePoint blog because why not use standard SharePoint functionality to do what it's designed to do. So the next real step from here would be to turn things loose to validation. So we would go into a deeper look at the counts to see, did all the counts of content from Jive, does it match up with what we have in SharePoint? And then we do a much deeper dive in terms of looking at the links. We actually have another utility we use that validates all the links, all the images, making sure things got migrated as they were expected to be. And then if there's any issues at all, we have a way to repair that stuff. But typically we like to try and validate and get it right up front. But that's basically the essence of the migration, and I hope this makes sense to you. I'm sure you guys may have some questions, but at least you get a sense for how this all fits together and works. So thanks for watching. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, or forgot to tie back to, is that we looked at a particular discussion in Jive, and we wanted to kind of see what that looks like in SharePoint. So this is Lisa's awesome discussion we saw earlier. If I go back to SharePoint, you'll see Lisa's awesome discussion. Same basic structure, everything kind of maintained. Again, not really real content here. It's just more of just test content, just to show that we can move stuff around, and really for test cases. But just wanted to kind of bring closure to that, make sure you guys see the resulting content.